Today we're talking Imperial Guard Mechanized Infantry and what appears to be one of the new standard battle line units, arming Chimera transports with 2 heavy flamers. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Now 9th edition 40k has brought a lot of changes to the Guard, and today I thought we'd talk about one of the more common themes I've seen across Astra Militarum lists, with some Guard commanders favouring a more heavily mechanized infantry approach to help with scoring objectives in 9th edition. In 8th I really wasn't the biggest fan of vehicles with heavy flamers on. In general they didn't weigh up very well against heavy bolters, and also if you did put your tank close enough to the enemy that you'd be able to be in flame range, then there'd be a good chance that your tank will be charged next turn and you might not be ever firing those flamer weapons again. 9th edition has brought some changes to this, which is why I think we're seeing more heavy flamers in play. So the unit that I want to talk about would be in general a Chimera with 2 heavy flamers, likely containing just a bare bones infantry squad and maybe an officer for some orders. A Chimera with 2 heavy flamers is 95 points in 9th edition, and the infantry squad will cost you another 50, so 145 points for the unit. I think one of the reasons that they're getting a second look is that they're just a very tough unit that's good at close range, and these are exactly the sort of characteristics you want for 9th edition objective grabbing. Unlike in 8th, we can't just afford to sit back for the first few turns and blow the enemy to bits with heavy guns. You really do need to be fighting over objectives in the midfield over the first few turns, which means that you need to put units there that can take the fire of the enemy, and particularly with primary objectives, it's very helpful to have units that can defend objectives, so basically parking a Chimera on it with a bunch of troops in it means that you've put a unit that's very hard to remove on the objective, because they first have to break the tank, then hopefully have enough anti-infantry weapons to clear the infantry squad inside it. It's often require a lot of resources for the enemy to expend. They might prefer to just fire at your heavy hitters like Lehman Russ tank commanders. On top of that, Chimeras are relatively fast as Guard go, and currently with the points changes, I think Flamers give us the best bang for our buck points wise. They can now quite happily get close to the enemy, cook some light infantry, and if they are charged in return, then just the next turn you can just flame away in close combat and guarantee to do a bit more damage. By taking 2 of the heavy flamers, you also make the tank so it might well be worth firing Overwatch against certain targets and worth the command point investment there. I think that these could work absolutely fine in pretty much most regiments, but if you can, either being Kachan or a custom regiment with gunnery experts is a pretty solid idea. Rerolling the number of shots on those flamers will translate to more hits over the course of a game. You really could field a fair few of these and just give your opponents a lot of units they need to deal with quickly if they want to wrestle your guardsmen off the objectives. In terms of variants on the loadout, I think it would be reasonable to include either a Storm Bolter or Heavy Stubber for a bit more damage dealing. In particular, I'd favour the Storm Bolter for it. They're only very cheap at 3 points, and they're almost guaranteed to be getting up and close and personal, so a little bit more anti-infantry firepower doesn't hurt. You could think about giving them Track Guards, although it would get a little bit expensive if you're using it on multiple units. Because of auto-hitting, you're not really going to take much degradation in terms of damage output, so ensuring that they can use that good movement right till they're done and keep on firing at those flamers could make Track Guards a bit more of a reasonable option on these than some other vehicles. I think that the reason that the heavy flamer is being taken over the heavy bolter at the moment is just because the heavy bolter is being priced at 15 points, which was a bit of a weird nerf in the Astra Militarum Codex, and we only found out that it's because the heavy bolters will be going up to damage 2 as per an FAQ. Once this happens, I think it might be a bit more of a decision between the flamer and the heavy bolter, but if we are thinking of getting the unit up close and taking objectives, then the heavy flamer might well still win out. The other option, which I think is fairly reasonable, is to save a few points by taking a multi-laser. Of course it won't really be doing all that much, they're fairly weak I think, but saving 10 points off the unit is actually pretty decent if the main thing that you're going for is durability, so I could see this as a valid alternative. So in terms of contents, I would see the default thing as being a standard infantry squad, potentially not armed with any upgrades whatsoever, and just taken bare bones. This helps them be fairly uncomplicated objective grabbers, not investing any more than you absolutely need to for the unit, and not making you feel too bad about just having them sit inside the Chimera if it does make sense to. If I were to upgrade them, I'd think about a plasma gun or melter gun, as they're both very cheap on ballistic skill 4 guardsmen, but I think you'd have to try and not let the special weapons distract them from their intended role, which would be objective grabbers as opposed to damage dealers. In terms of support, I think about company or platoon commanders, and maybe an astropath for some psychic shenanigans. Could be a good way to keep a psychic maelstrom astropath safe before it gets close to deliver some mortal wounds to an enemy character. And if you are looking at special weapons, I'd recommend more things like veteran squads, special weapon squads, or company command squads, all of which can put out a very decent amount of plasma or melter fire point for point. Finally, you could even think about putting Bulgarin inside these chimeras for a very scary objective nicking package. Hopefully once the opponent's ploughed a lot of anti-tank weapons into dealing with the tank itself, having 4 Bullgrim pile out would hopefully just be too many wounds for them to deal with all in one turn, and potentially allow you to get a decent charge off in your following turn. In terms of in-game tactics, having 2 heavy flamers does mean that you're a lot more likely to want to advance up the board and also utilise smoke launchers, both of which are pretty excellent for going your first turn firepower for -1 to hit and also more movement. Even if you do upgrade them with double heavy bolters and utilise those las gun arrays, Chimeras don't tend to have the greatest damage output anyway, so it's not exactly the biggest loss in the world. Once they're in position, they can be just used as mobile bunkers to drop troops onto objectives, or maybe jump out and do some first rank, second rank firing, or thinking about just getting out the infantry squads and moving them across the board, which should give you a pretty ludicrous threat range for stealing objectives from under the enemy's nose. You can kind of bully other units with them and disrupt and distract the enemy, particularly if your opponent has a scary shooting unit, say a unit of infantry of some sort, then it could be a real nuisance to lock them up with a Chimera and stop them activating the following turn. They should hopefully be able to deal a decent amount of damage to any light infantry that are in the midfield as well. So in general, I can see these things being used quite a bit in more competitive Astra Militarum lists over the coming weeks. It will certainly be interesting to see exactly what the wording on that FAQ changing heavy weapons and heavy bolters is, and whether or not there's going to be any points changes. If there aren't, then it might only be a bit of a buff to these guys, seeing as 12-inch heavy flamers are going to allow more things to be in range. It'll be interesting to see if they win out over heavy bolters, when heavy bolters get damaged too. So let me know what you think of the unit down in the comments below. Is it something that you've considered adding to your guard battle line? If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics for plenty of other Astra Militarum and other 40k tactics content, which comes out pretty much every day. If you've been enjoying the videos, then I'd also just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Making all of these videos does take quite a long time, so if you are enjoying regularly, then any support is massively appreciated, as it is what allows me to focus on this as more of a full-time thing. Channel Patrons get to see one video early each week, there's regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and you also get automatic entry to the monthly prize giveaway for Auspex Tactics, where we post out some big kits once per month. If any of that sounds interesting to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.